Story number 1. The Pemberton Curse. The Pemberton Hotel stood on the edge of the California coastline, its grand yet weathered exterior clinging to the past like a ghost to its grave. Once a vibrant retreat for artists and dreamers, by 1997, it had faded into obscurity, hosting only the occasional traveler or local event. That New Year's Eve, the hotel came alive for the first time in decades, welcoming 10 guests to a private party in its once opulent ballroom. It was a night of celebration destined to be remembered, but not for the reasons anyone anticipated. I was one of the 10 invited that night, though I hesitate to call it an invitation. It felt more like an obligation. A friend of a friend insisting I come along to make up the numbers. The organizer, a man named Daniel Ward, was known for his eccentricities and his love of the macabre. The Pemberton, with its creaking floors and air of decayed grandeur, seemed a fitting venue for his peculiar tastes. The night began like any other New Year's gathering. The ballroom was decorated with gold and silver streamers, the scent of champagne mingling with the faint tang of salt air from the ocean beyond. A string quartet played softly in the corner as we mingled, the 10 of us exchanging pleasantries and half-hearted resolutions. There was a strange tension in the air, though none of us could pinpoint its source. The hotel staff, a skeleton crew of 3, moved about nervously, their eyes darting to the corners of the room as if they expected something, or someone, to emerge from the shadows. When asked about their unease, they simply muttered something about technical issues and old wiring. The first sign that something was amiss came at 11:30 p.m. The string quartet stopped abruptly, their instruments producing an ear-piercing screech. The musicians apologized profusely, claiming interference from the building's faulty electrical system. Moments later, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness before the emergency backup bathed us in an eerie red glow. Daniel, ever the showman, laughed it off. Just the Pemberton adding to the atmosphere, he joked, raising his glass. Let's toast to the unexpected. The uneasy laughter that followed did little to dispel the growing sense of dread. The backup lights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to move on their own, and the sound of the ocean, usually soothing, now carried an ominous rhythm, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the waves. At precisely midnight, as the fireworks erupted outside, chaos descended upon the ballroom. A series of deafening gunshots rang out, cutting through the celebratory noise like a knife through silk. The screams that followed were short-lived, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the distant echo of the fireworks. I had thrown myself to the floor the moment the shots rang out, my heart pounding as I tried to make sense of the chaos. When the noise subsided, I dared to lift my head, and the scene before me was one of sheer horror. 8 of the 10 guests lay lifeless, their bodies crumpled where they had fallen. Blood pooled on the ornate rug, its rich crimson soaking into the once beautiful pattern. Only 2 of us survived, myself and a young woman named Claire. We stared at each other in disbelief, our breaths shallow and rapid. The room was eerily silent, save for the faint crackle of static from a broken speaker in the corner. There was no sign of a gunman, no weapon, no shattered windows or forced entry. It was as if the carnage had materialized out of thin air. The police arrived within minutes, alerted by a panicked hotel staff member who had heard the commotion from the lobby. They swept through the building, searching every room and corridor, but found nothing. The security cameras, which should have recorded the entire event, had mysteriously stopped working at 11:59 p.m., only to resume at 12:10 a.m., capturing nothing but the aftermath. The investigators were baffled. The autopsies confirmed the victims had been shot at close range, yet no bullets or casings were found. There were no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints, and no explanation for how the killer could have entered or exited the locked room unnoticed. The case quickly became the stuff of legend, a chilling, unsolved mystery that left a permanent stain on the Pemberton Hotel's already tarnished reputation. But the story didn't end there. For weeks after the massacre, I was plagued by nightmares. I saw the ballroom drenched in blood, the faces of the victims twisted in terror, and the faint outline of a figure lurking in the shadows. The nightmares grew more vivid with each passing night, accompanied by strange occurrences in my apartment. Flickering lights, cold spots, and the faint scent of gunpowder lingering in the air. Desperate for answers, I reached out to Claire. She had experienced similar phenomena, her once bright demeanor now overshadowed by fear and paranoia. Together, we decided to return to the Pemberton, hoping to find some explanation for the events of that night. The hotel had been closed indefinitely following the massacre, its grand exterior now cloaked in darkness and disrepair. Breaking in was surprisingly easy, almost as if the building wanted us to enter. Armed with flashlights and a growing sense of dread, we made our way to the ballroom, its once opulent interior now a desolate shell. As we stood in the center of the room, the temperature dropped suddenly, our breaths visible in the frigid air. The faint sound of music began to play, echoing through the empty halls, a warped version of the quartet's melody from that fateful night. The shadows around us seemed to thicken, coalescing into indistinct shapes that moved with an unnatural fluidity. Then, we heard it, a single gunshot, loud and clear, followed by the faint whisper of a voice. "You shouldn't have come back." The shadows converged, forming the outline of a figure, a man in a dark suit, his face obscured by a featureless mask. He raised an invisible weapon, the faint outline of a gun materializing in his hands. Instinctively, we dropped to the floor, the deafening sound of gunfire ringing out once more. When the noise subsided, the figure was gone, and the room was silent once more. But the air felt heavier, charged with an unseen energy that pressed down on us like a weight. We fled the hotel, our minds racing with fear and confusion. In the weeks that followed, Claire and I tried to make sense of what we had witnessed. We combed through historical records and old police reports, uncovering a chilling pattern. Every few decades, the Pemberton had been the site of unexplained violence. Guests disappearing without a trace, staff members found dead under mysterious circumstances, and whispers of a malevolent force that seemed tied to the land itself. The Pemberton Hotel remains abandoned to this day, a grim monument to the horrors that unfolded within its walls. The case of the New Year's Eve massacre has long since gone cold, the names of the victims fading from public memory. But those who survived and those who dare to investigate know the truth. Something dark resides within the Pemberton, an entity that defies explanation and thrives on fear. And sometimes, when the wind howls through the empty halls and the shadows grow long, you can still hear the faint echo of gunshots and the whispered warnings of those who came before. You shouldn't have come back. Story number 2. Whispers in the firelight. New Year's Eve has always held a special place in my heart, a time of new beginnings, reflections, and the warmth of shared moments with loved ones. But for Ashley Freeman and Loria Bible, it became the night that shattered their lives and left an indelible mark on the quiet town of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. I still remember the night vividly, not just because it changed the course of 2 young lives, but because it awakened something dark and restless within the shadows of their family home. As a neighbor and longtime friend of the Freeman family, the events that unfolded that night haunt me to this day. The Freeman residence was a charming, 2-story house nestled at the end of Maple Street, surrounded by towering oak trees that swayed gently in the winter breeze. Ashley, a vibrant 17-year-old, was known for her infectious laughter and unwavering loyalty to her best friend, Loria. Together, they were inseparable, their bond forged through years of shared secrets and dreams. On December 31st, 1999, the air was crisp with anticipation. The Freeman family had invited friends and neighbors over for a New Year's Eve celebration, filling the house with the sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and the occasional burst of fireworks outside. Ashley and Loria were the life of the party, their youthful energy lighting up every room they entered. As midnight approached, The mood shifted from joyous celebration to quiet contemplation. The group gathered in the living room, sipping on cider and sharing stories of the past year. Ashley stood by the fireplace, gazing into the flames as if searching for answers within their dancing patterns. Loria sat beside her, offering silent support and companionship. Then, just as the clock struck 12, a series of loud bangs echoed through the house, jolting everyone from their reverie. The lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that seemed to stretch and distort across the walls. Panic set in as screams and shouts filled the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. In the chaos that ensued, I remember Ashley and Loria disappearing into the darkness, their cries for help barely audible over the din moments later. The fire erupted, flames engulfing the living room in a matter of seconds. The house became a furnace, the heat unbearable as people scrambled to escape the inferno. By morning, the Freeman home was a smoldering wreck, charred remains of what was once a sanctuary of love and laughter. Ashley's parents were found dead, victims of gunshot wounds that investigators couldn't explain. The doors and windows had been forcibly opened, suggesting a violent intrusion, yet no sign of the assailant was ever discovered. Ashley and Loria were nowhere to be found, their disappearance adding another layer of mystery to the already horrifying scene. Over the years, countless theories emerged, ranging from burglary gone wrong to more sinister explanations involving cults or vengeful spirits. The presence of handprints in the freshly fallen snow, both human and otherwise, only fueled the speculation. Some nights, residents swore they could hear the faint echoes of screams carried by the wind, as if the spirits of Ashley and Loria were still trapped within the ashes of their former home. As the years passed, the case went cold, leaving Broken Arrow shrouded in fear and uncertainty. Families moved away, unable to shake the lingering dread that seemed to permeate the town. The Freeman house stood abandoned, a haunting reminder of that fateful New Year's Eve, its windows boarded up and the once vibrant garden now overrun with weeds. I couldn't forget the tragedy that had befallen my friends. The unanswered questions gnawed at me, and I found myself returning to the Freeman property time and again, hoping to find closure or at least some semblance of peace. Each visit deepened my unease, the oppressive silence broken only by the whispers of the past that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath my feet. One particularly cold winter night, driven by a mix of desperation and determination, I decided to spend a night at the Freeman house. Armed with a flashlight, a journal, and a camera, I hoped to uncover the truth that had eluded investigators for so long. The town was blanketed in snow, the moon casting a pale glow over the desolate landscape as I approached the house. The front door creaked open with a reluctant groan, revealing the charred remains of what once was a welcoming home. The interior was a maze of blackened walls and twisted metal, the remnants of furniture barely recognizable amidst the destruction. I set up my equipment in what had been the living room, the air thick with the scent of smoke and decay. As midnight approached, the temperature seemed to drop further, my breath forming visible puffs in the frigid air. I sat by the remains of the fireplace, opening my journal to document any anomalies. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant howl of the wind and the occasional crackle of settling debris. Then, just as the clock began to chime the final seconds of the year, a chilling presence filled the room. The air grew heavy, and the flames from the remnants of the fireplace flickered unnaturally, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder, turning slowly to face nothing but empty space. Heart pounding, I reached for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. There, at the edge of the room, stood the apparition of a young woman in a white dress. Ashley. Her eyes were hollow, filled with a sorrow that pierced my very soul. Beside her, another figure materialized, Loria, her form wavering like mist in the cold air. "We never got to leave," Ashley whispered, her voice echoing through the room. "He's still here, watching us." Before I could respond, The temperature plummeted further, and the shadows deepened, coalescing into a menacing form wielding a blood-stained axe. The phantom killer had returned, his presence a manifestation of the unresolved pain and fear that had plagued Broken Arrow for decades. Panic surged through me as the apparition lunged forward, the sound of his heavy breathing filling the room. I fumbled for my camera, snapping photos in a desperate attempt to capture evidence of the supernatural. The flash of light seemed to momentarily repel the darkness, revealing the twisted features of the phantom before he dissolved into the shadows once more. Determined to survive, I stood my ground, speaking softly to the spirits. I'm here to help you find peace. Let me honor your memories and bring justice to those who wronged you. The room grew still, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if my words had broken the curse that bound the spirits to their eternal torment. Ashley and Loria approached me, their forms becoming more defined, their eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. "Thank you," Loria whispered, her voice now filled with hope. "Remember us. Honor our story." As dawn broke over Broken Arrow, the first light of day pierced through the remnants of the Freeman house, casting a warm glow over the desolate landscape. The spirits of Ashley and Loria had found the closure they so desperately sought, their whispers now a gentle reminder of the importance of remembering and honoring those who have been lost. Leaving the Freeman property that morning, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The mystery that had haunted Broken Arrow for so long was finally resolved, not through the revelations of human investigators, but through a personal connection and a willingness to listen to the echoes of the past. The town, though scarred by tragedy, began to heal, the shadows lifted by the light of understanding and compassion. Years later, the story of Ashley Freeman and Loria Bible remains a poignant reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Broken Arrow, once a place of fear and uncertainty, stands as a testament to the enduring power of memory and the human spirit's capacity to bring peace to even the most restless souls. And sometimes, when the winter winds howl through the silent streets and the moonlight dances on the remnants of the Freeman house, I can almost hear the faint whispers of Ashley and Loria, eternal echoes of a night that forever changed their lives and the heart of Broken Arrow. Story number 3. Shadows over Tahoe. Lake Tahoe in Nevada has always been a place where beauty and mystery intertwine, where the serene waters reflect not just the surrounding mountains, but also the hidden depths of human emotion. I never believed in ghosts or curses, but the events of New Year's Eve 1980 changed everything I thought I knew about that tranquil paradise. I was 17, full of life and dreams, celebrating the turn of the millennium with my closest friends at a secluded lakeside house. The property was a relic from a bygone era, its rustic charm enhanced by the snow that began to blanket the landscape as midnight approached. The air was crisp, filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses as we toasted to the future. As the clock ticked towards midnight, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. The fireworks display was set to light up the sky, and we gathered around a bonfire, sharing stories and making plans for the years ahead. It was a night meant for joy, for creating memories that would last a lifetime. But as the final seconds of the year slipped away, an uneasy silence descended upon us. The fireworks began, exploding in vibrant colors against the night sky. But amidst the celebration, an inexplicable tension gripped the atmosphere. It was subtle at first, an odd feeling that something was watching us from the shadows. Then, without warning, the festivities were shattered by the sound of glass breaking. A masked figure had breached the perimeter, moving with a deliberate, menacing grace. Panic erupted as screams pierced the night air, and chaos ensued. The intruder wielded a heavy axe, his movements swift and brutal, targeting unsuspecting victims with terrifying precision. 3 of my friends were mercilessly taken, their lives extinguished in moments of sheer horror. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend the nightmare unfolding before my eyes. The assailant vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving behind a scene of devastation and unanswered questions. In the aftermath, two of us managed to escape, their breaths ragged and hearts pounding with the trauma of survival. The police arrived swiftly, cordoning off the area and beginning their investigation. Fingerprints and DNA samples were collected. Yet the identity of the phantom killer remained elusive. The case went cold, leaving a lingering sense of dread that haunted the community for years to come. I left Tahoe shortly after that night, carrying the weight of what had happened with me. The memories were etched into my mind, vivid and unshakable. But as time passed, strange occurrences began to plague me, whispers in the dead of night, fleeting shadows that danced just beyond my vision, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. It was as if the spirits of those lost were trying to reach out, their presence a constant reminder of that fateful night. Determined to understand what was happening, I returned to Tahoe a decade later, hoping to find closure and perhaps some answers. The once bustling lakeside town had changed, but the scars of the past were still visible. The house where the massacre occurred stood abandoned, its windows boarded up and the surrounding area overgrown with weeds. Locals spoke of strange noises emanating from the property, of eerie lights flickering in the dead of night, and of an unshakable sense of unease that hung over the area. I decided to investigate, driven by a need to confront the horrors that had shaped my life. Armed with a flashlight, camera, and a deep-seated determination, I approached the forsaken house. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant call of a night owl and the rustling of leaves in the wind. As I stepped through the broken doorway, the temperature plummeted, my breath visible in the frigid air. The interior was a mess of shattered glass and scattered belongings, remnants of the chaos that had unfolded years ago. I moved cautiously through the rooms, my flashlight casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. Every creak and groan of the old house sent shivers down my spine, the oppressive atmosphere suffocating in its intensity. In the main living area, I found the remnants of the bonfire we had gathered around that night, charred logs and broken glass from the shattered bottles. My heart raced as I imagined the terror that had gripped my friends in those final moments. But what unnerved me most was the feeling that I was not alone. The air seemed to hum with a restless energy, the spirits of the past unable to move on. Suddenly, the temperature dropped even further, and a spectral figure materialized before me, a woman in a flowing white gown, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "Why do you disturb our peace?" she whispered, her voice echoing through the empty house. I stumbled back, my mind racing to find a rational explanation. I just wanted to understand," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The apparition reached out, her translucent hand passing through me as if I were made of mist. "Remember us," she implored, her eyes pleading. "Honor our memories." Before I could respond, the room around me began to shift. Shadows morphed into grotesque shapes, and the whispers turned into agonized screams that filled the space with unbearable anguish. I felt an invisible force pressing down on me, the weight of their suffering threatening to crush my spirit. Desperate to escape, I turned and fled the house, the echoes of the past chasing me into the night. Outside, the air was thick with the scent of pine and the lingering traces of smoke from the old fire. The moon cast a pale glow over the landscape, illuminating the path as I made my way back to civilization. But the horrors of that night lingered. I couldn't escape the feeling that the spirits were still with me, their whispers haunting my every step. Determined to find peace, I sought out a local medium, hoping to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Together, we conducted a séance at the site of the massacre, calling out to the lost souls in an attempt to bring closure to their tormented spirits. As we chanted, the air grew colder, and the spirits began to manifest once more. The women and men lost that night appeared before us, their eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," they whispered in unison, their voices a harmonious blend of relief and peace. "Remember us. Honor our lives." A profound sense of calm washed over me as the spirits began to fade, their presence lingering only as a gentle breeze through the trees. The curse that had plagued Tahoe for decades was lifted, the restless souls finally finding the peace they had long been denied. Leaving Tahoe that night, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of fulfillment and understanding. The phantom killer may never be caught, but the true horror lay not in his elusive identity, but in the lives shattered by his rampage and the lingering spirits seeking recognition and closure. Years later, the story of the Lake Tahoe massacre remains a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring impact of tragedy. The house by the lake stands as a silent monument to the past, its haunted legacy a testament to the power of remembrance and the resilience of the human spirit. And sometimes, when the wind whispers through the trees and the moonlight dances on the water's surface, I can almost hear the faint echoes of that night, a haunting reminder that some shadows never truly fade, but linger in the depths of our memories, forever intertwined with the places we hold dear. Story number 4. Whispers in the Shadows, the Evelyn Scott Case. New York City in the late 1950s was a place of dreams and ambitions, where the bright lights of Broadway mirrored the aspirations of countless souls seeking their fortune. Amidst the bustling streets and towering skyscrapers, Evelyn Scott stood out not just as a renowned teacher, but as a beacon of hope and inspiration to her students. Her sudden and brutal disappearance on New Year's Eve 1959 left the city in a state of shock and unease, a mystery that has haunted the hearts of many ever since. I remember the first time I heard about Evelyn Scott's case. It was a chilly winter evening, the kind where the air bites with an unrelenting frost, and the streets of Manhattan are adorned with twinkling holiday lights. As a young journalist fresh out of college, I was eager to make my mark, and true crime stories were my gateway into the labyrinth of human psychology and the darker aspects of society. Evelyn Scott was a beloved teacher at a prestigious high school in Midtown, known for her compassionate nature and unwavering dedication. She had a way of making even the most disinterested students feel seen and valued. Her colleagues admired her, and her students adored her. So, when she left a New Year's Eve party abruptly to catch a taxi home, few imagined it would be the last time anyone would see her alive. The night of December 31st, 1959, was supposed to be a celebration. Friends gathered at an upscale hotel, exchanging laughter and toasting to the coming year. Evelyn, always the social butterfly, mingled effortlessly, her presence lighting up the room. But as the clock struck midnight, she excused herself, claiming a need to return home early. Little did anyone know, this decision would spiral into one of New York's most perplexing unsolved murders. The next morning, Evelyn's lifeless body was discovered on a deserted street in the Lower East Side, her body bearing multiple stab wounds. The scene was gruesome, the brutality of the attack sending ripples of fear through the community. Police reports indicated no signs of a struggle, and the area showed no evidence of forced entry. Surveillance cameras from that era, rudimentary by today's standards, failed to capture any clear image of the perpetrator, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. As weeks turned into months, theories abounded. Was it a random act of violence in a city notorious for its dark underbelly? Or was there something more sinister at play? The lack of tangible evidence only fueled the speculation, and whispers of a curse or supernatural involvement began to circulate among the locals. Driven by a mixture of professional curiosity and personal obsession, I delved deeper into Evelyn's life, hoping to uncover any clue that could shed light on her tragic end. Interviews with her family, friends, and colleagues painted a picture of a woman who was universally loved and respected. No one could fathom why someone would want to harm her. Yet, the chilling reality remained. Evelyn Scott was dead, and her killer was still at large. One evening, as I sat in my cramped apartment surrounded by stacks of papers and old newspaper clippings, a knock echoed through the room. I opened the door to find an elderly man with a weathered face and piercing blue eyes standing before me. He introduced himself as Henry Miller, a private investigator who had been following the case for years. "I believe I can help you," Henry said, his voice gravelly with age and experience. "But it's not just about finding a murderer. There's something else, something you need to understand." Intrigued and slightly unnerved, I invited him in. Henry began recounting his findings, stories of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena that seemed to surround Evelyn's case. He spoke of late-night phone calls to her home from an untraceable number, mysterious figures seen lurking near her residence, and inexplicable cold spots in her apartment that persisted even after her death. But the most unsettling part of his account was the series of eerie coincidences that mirrored Evelyn's last moments. Objects moving on their own, whispers in empty rooms, and fleeting shadows that vanished when approached. Henry believed that Evelyn's spirit was trying to communicate, trapped between the realms of the living and the dead, seeking justice or perhaps a way to move on, determined to uncover the truth. Henry and I decided to visit Evelyn's apartment, now cordoned off by police and swarming with forensic teams. The building, a modest structure in a quiet neighborhood, stood as a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. As we entered, the air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and the lingering tension of a crime scene. Evelyn's apartment was meticulously clean, save for the disarray caused by the investigation. Her belongings were untouched, a stark contrast to the chaos of her murder. As we walked through the rooms, Henry pointed out subtle anomalies, faint fingerprints where they shouldn't be, slight disturbances in the dust patterns, and shadows that seemed to linger longer than natural light would allow. In her bedroom, we found the source of the cold spots. A large mirror dominated one wall, its surface reflecting the room in sharp detail. But something was off. The glass appeared to ripple, like a disturbed pond, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure standing behind me. When I turned, there was no one there, only the reflection staring back with hollow eyes. "Evelyn," I whispered, feeling a chill run down my spine. "If you're here, can you help us?" The room grew colder, the air thick with an unspoken presence. Henry began a makeshift seance, his voice steady as he called out to Evelyn's spirit. "Evelyn Scott, if you can hear us, please help us understand what happened to you." For a moment, there was nothing, just the hum of the city outside and the distant sound of traffic. Then, the mirror began to fog up, condensation forming intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. A shadowy figure slowly materialized, her form translucent yet unmistakably human. Her eyes, filled with sorrow and desperation, met mine. "I didn't do it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's still out there." Before I could respond, the figure dissolved into a swirl of mist, the temperature in the room dropping even further. Henry and I exchanged a look of bewilderment and fear. This was beyond anything we had anticipated. Evelyn's spirit was not just trying to communicate. She was guiding us, determined to follow her lead. We revisited old case files, piecing together every detail of Evelyn's life and the events leading up to her murder. We uncovered a pattern of threats and strange coincidences that pointed to a potential suspect, a former student who had been expelled for inappropriate behavior and had recently resurfaced in the area. Armed with this new information, Henry contacted the local authorities, presenting our findings and urging them to re-examine the case with fresh eyes. Skepticism and resistance met our pleas, but persistence won out. A renewed investigation was launched, focusing on the now-deceased former student who had mysteriously vanished shortly after Evelyn's death. Months passed without any significant breakthroughs, but Henry and I remained steadfast. One night, as I sat alone in my apartment reviewing our research, a sudden gust of cold wind blew through the room, extinguishing the lamp and plunging me into darkness. The same shadowy figure appeared in the mirror, her presence more defined this time. "Find him," she urged, her voice echoing in the silence. "He's the key to everything." Determined to heed her plea, Henry and I tracked down leads that eventually led us to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. There, hidden in a forgotten corner, we found the former student, now a broken man living in the shadows. Confronting him, we uncovered the horrifying truth. He had harbored a deep resentment towards Evelyn, blaming her for his downfall and driven by a twisted obsession to exact revenge. The evidence was damning, and the authorities moved swiftly to apprehend him. As he was taken into custody, the oppressive atmosphere that had haunted us for months began to lift. The shadowy figure in the mirror no longer appeared, and the cold spots ceased their relentless chill. The case of Evelyn Scott was finally closed, but the experience left an indelible mark on me. The whispers of her spirit had guided us to the truth, bridging the gap between life and death in a way that defied explanation. As I penned the final details of my investigation, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of closure, not just for Evelyn, but for myself as well. Years later, the memory of Evelyn Scott and the mystery that surrounded her death remains a haunting reminder of the unseen forces that linger in the shadows. Central Park, with its vibrant energy and hidden corners, still holds the echoes of that fateful night, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit and the mysteries that lie just beyond our perception. And sometimes, when the city lights flicker just right and the wind carries a faint whisper through the night, I believe Evelyn's spirit is still watching, her story a lingering echo in the heart of New York, a silent guardian reminding us that some mysteries are meant to be remembered and honored, their whispers forever etched in the fabric of the city. Story number 5. Whispers of Hinterkaifeck. I've always been drawn to unsolved mysteries, those cold cases that linger in the shadows, whispering secrets that refuse to fade. So, when I stumbled upon the story of Hinterkaifeck Farm, nestled in the remote Bavarian countryside of Germany, I knew I had to delve deeper. The tale of the Hinterkaifeck murders, a brutal, unsolved crime from 1922, had intrigued me for years, its eerie details and lingering questions fueling my obsession. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to visit the very place where the tragedy unfolded. Equipped with my camera, notebook, and a healthy dose of skepticism, I boarded a train bound for Bavaria. The journey was long and arduous, the landscape passing in a blur of snow-covered fields and dense forests. As the train chugged steadily forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was venturing into a story that had never truly been told. Upon arriving in the nearest town, I arranged for a local guide, Heinrich, who had grown up hearing the legends surrounding Hinterkaifeck. His weathered face and cautious demeanor hinted at a lifetime of witnessing the town's dark history. Together, we drove through winding roads, the landscape growing increasingly desolate as we approached the farmstead. Hinterkaifeck lay secluded, surrounded by vast expanses of untamed wilderness. The farm itself was a simple structure, its wooden walls weathered by time and the harsh Bavarian winters. As we stepped onto the property, a chill wind swept through the air, carrying with it the scent of pine and something more acrid, burnt wood, perhaps remnants of the long-extinguished fires that once warmed the home. Heinrich led me to the farmhouse, his footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. The building stood silent, windows dark and shutters firmly closed, as if guarding the secrets within. We entered through the creaking front door, the interior cloaked in shadows despite the daylight filtering through the dusty windows. The air was thick with the musty scent of decay, and an unsettling stillness hung heavy in the rooms. I began my exploration, documenting every detail: the worn wooden floors, the old furnishings covered in white sheets, and the remnants of daily life that time had attempted to erase. As I moved from room to room, Heinrich shared what little he knew about the family who once called Hinterkaifeck home. The Gruber family: Andreas, his wife Casilia, their 2 children, their maid Victoria, and their cattle had lived a quiet, albeit isolated, life on the farm. Weeks before the murders, the family had reported strange occurrences. Unexplained noises echoed through the house at night. Footsteps, whispers, and the sound of something heavy dragging across the wooden floors. Footprints, larger than those of any family member, were found in the fresh snow around the farm, leading from the barn to the house. Yet no one had ever seen anyone approach. One night, as we sat by the fireplace, Heinrich recounted the final days leading up to the tragedy. The family had been unusually tense, arguing over minor matters, and Andreas had installed new fencing around the property, isolating them further from the outside world. Then, on New Year's Eve, the unimaginable happened. The entire family was found brutally murdered with a mattock, their bodies scattered throughout the house in a scene of chaos and horror. The killer had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a legacy of fear. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the farm, I felt a growing unease. The stories of restless spirits and the lingering presence of the Gruber family seemed to seep into the very walls of the house. I decided to spend the night, hoping to capture any paranormal activity that might explain the mysteries surrounding Hinterkaifeck. The first night was uneventful, save for the occasional creak and the distant howl of wolves. Exhausted from the day's exploration, I drifted into a restless sleep. But as midnight approached, the atmosphere in the farmhouse shifted. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the chill, and an oppressive silence settled over the rooms. A faint noise jolted me awake, a soft thud coming from upstairs, heart pounding. I grabbed my flashlight and crept toward the sound. The hallway was dark, the only light emanating from the moonlight streaming through the windows. As I reached the top of the stairs, the noise repeated a deliberate, heavy thump. I called out softly, "Is anyone there?" No response, only the sound of my own voice echoing back at me. I continued forward, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness, until I reached the master bedroom. The door stood slightly ajar, revealing a room frozen in time. The bed was neatly made, the fireplace cold and dark, but the oppressive feeling lingered, a sense of being watched pressing down on me. I moved closer to the window, shining my light outside. The snow had fallen heavily, blanketing the landscape in white, obscuring any movement beyond the immediate surroundings. As I turned back to the room, I noticed something unusual, a faint, red smudge on the glass, resembling a handprint. My pulse quickened as I reached out to touch it, the cold glass sending a shiver down my spine. Suddenly, the temperature dropped further, my breath quickening as the room seemed to darken around me. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision, and I spun around, flashlight held high. There, standing in the doorway, was the apparition of a woman in a flowing white kimono, Casilia Gruber, her face pale and sorrowful, eyes hollow with eternal anguish. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice a haunting melody that echoed through the room. I stammered, trying to find my voice. "I'm trying to understand what happened here, to honor your memory." Her ghostly form flickered, and the room filled with the sound of distant screams and the clanging of metal. The oppressive atmosphere intensified, pressing down on me with a weight that threatened to crush my very soul. I felt a surge of fear and empathy, torn between my desire to help and the overwhelming terror of her presence. "We were betrayed," she whispered, tears forming in her spectral eyes. "Left to suffer in silence. Remember our pain." The room seemed to warp around me, the walls closing in as the spirits of the past reached out with their sorrow. I realized then that the key to breaking the curse lay in uncovering the truth behind their suffering. Determined to help, I vowed to dig deeper into the history of Hinterkaifeck, to bring justice to those who had been silenced for nearly a century. The next morning, armed with newfound determination, I returned to the library to comb through old records and newspaper clippings. The deeper I delved, the more I uncovered the dark underbelly of the town's mining history. Whispers of corruption, greed, and cover-ups hinted at motives that had never been fully explored. Andreas Gruber had been a respected miner, but his recent struggles with debt and disputes over land rights had painted him as a man desperate and isolated. As days turned into weeks, I pieced together the fragments of the story. The strange occurrences had escalated in the weeks leading up to the murders. Each event a piece of a puzzle that spoke of fear and impending doom. The footprints in the snow, the sudden isolation, the mounting tension within the family, all signs of a brewing storm that none had been able to calm. One night, as I prepared to document my findings, the farmhouse seemed to awaken around me. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "Remember us? Help us find peace." The apparition of Casilia appeared once more, her sorrow evident in her ethereal form. I spoke softly, recounting the truths I had uncovered, acknowledging the pain and betrayal that had led to their tragic end. The room began to change, the oppressive darkness lifting as the spirits responded to my words. The air grew warmer, the whispers transforming into gentle murmurs of gratitude. Casilia's form shimmered, her eyes reflecting a sense of relief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now filled with hope. "You have remembered us." As dawn broke, the farmhouse felt different, lighter, as if the weight of the past had been lifted. The spirits had found the closure they had long been denied, their stories finally acknowledged and honored. Heinrich and I stood outside, watching the first rays of sunlight pierce through the clouds, illuminating the snow-covered landscape with a newfound sense of peace. Leaving Hinterkaifeck, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The curse that had haunted the farm for nearly a century was broken, not through force or confrontation, but through understanding and compassion. The story of the Gruber family, once shrouded in mystery and fear, was now a testament to the enduring power of truth and empathy. Years later, the experience at Hinterkaifeck remains a defining moment in my career and my life. The whispers of the past taught me that some mysteries are not meant to remain hidden, and that honoring those who have been lost is the key to unlocking the door to peace. As I share the story of Hinterkaifeck, I hope it serves as a reminder that even in the darkest of places, there is always a path to redemption and closure, illuminated by the light of understanding and respect. And sometimes, when I gaze upon an old, abandoned place or hear the faint echoes of forgotten voices, I remember Hinterkaifeck, a place where shadows held secrets, and every whisper carried the weight of untold sorrow, now laid to rest through the simple act of remembering and honoring the lives that once thrived there.